Okay, here's another squirrel. I've got this ugly code up on the screen here. Now we're going to create a child theme, but let me just show you one nice thing that PHP Storm can do here for you. This code right here, it's minified. You know, it's compacted so, you know, to decrease the network payload as it's delivered. This is actually Google's homepage. Go to google.com, take this. So I just knew I could get some ugly code if I went there. So let's show you one feature here. It's called code reformatting. And if you click that, you wouldn't necessarily want to do this and then deploy it. But if you do want to take a look at some code and see what it's doing, this will help you a little bit. Just really quickly, it just reformats the code for you. You can even try to find some potential errors for you. So it says mismatch property value. I don't know what's wrong with that, but yeah, it's pretty nice. I mean, it made all this CSS just formatted real nicely. At Google, it looks like they put CSS, HTML, and JavaScript all into your same file here. Another feature, though, let's say we want to change the name of that variable. We can rename that to oops. So it found all locations of that variable and changed it in all spots at once. So that's something that a IDE like this will do for you. That's pretty nice. Another thing that's nice is hypothetically, let's say you're in one giant function here, and you have a block of code here. Your function's a couple hundred lines of code, but you see a block of code here that does something that you can put a name to. You can actually highlight that code and extract a method. And all it asks you to do is give the method a name. It figures out what parameters it needs to pass in, it figures out what the return type is, and it does that all for you. So they can help you make your code more readable. And once you learn the quick keys, it becomes really nice. This IDE, by the way, is called PHP Storm. It's by a company called JetBrains. I first learned about JetBrains a few years ago when I was doing C# development, and it just this plugin called ReSharper just plugged into Visual Studio and just made my life a whole lot easier. So this is a paid IDE, but it saves a lot of time, makes life a lot better. So I have no problem paying for it. Another site here. I just went to the ugliest site in the world. I googled ugly HTML, and this is, I think, typical of a handwritten site. You have some comments here. You have, looks like a blog post that's commented out eventually. Funny thing about this site was it wasn't a WordPress site, but they're linking to WordPress content all over the place. Other people's sites. But when you reformat it, it becomes a bit nicer, a little bit easier to read. There's their blog post. Just brings them out. Maybe they were extending, really far off this side of the screen. But let's see. Yeah. Anyway, code reformatting, love it. If you are putting your code in source control though, and you're working with some new code, and it's ugly, and you want to reformat it, I would recommend first reformatting and then checking that into source control by itself before making any changes. And the reason for that is because when you compare file sets, compare changes, it's going to look like every line changed in the code. So if you put a comment on your check-in saying that you're just doing code cleanup only, people can rest assured that you're probably not breaking anything or changing functionality. But then wait until after that check-in to make a change so that when people look at the code delta between two files, they can actually see the line of code that changed that actually affect functionality. But let's move on. Let's create a new project and actually kill the squirrel and make a child theme. So we'll just make an empty project. And now what we want to do is connect out to a production WordPress server. And we want to pull in, we're going to pull in the theme files, just the files we're concerned about for now. We're not going to pull in everything. But to do that, we do have to go into the settings. Go down to build, execution, and deployment, and we can add a new server here. So we'll call this production. It's going to be secure FTP, so SFTP, and the host is production 422. It already knows the port.
So how do you know all those values for these fields? Where are you getting these values?
Okay, so the SFTP host, that's the website itself.
Okay.
The username, root is the account that always exists on a Linux host. And I often use the poor practice of not creating user accounts like I should. And this is just kind of a throwaway server for demo purposes anyway. Then the password, of course, just the password that I set up. So those are the only three things that I filled in, besides setting up SFTP. And what I did here when I clicked Add Server, click the plus sign here, it just asked for a name for the server, and that's really just how that server will be referred to throughout PHP Storm. It's just kind of a friendly name for the server. But after I enter in the server name and the username and the password, I can test the connection, and it verifies that it connected just fine. And we do have to set up some mappings, and so what that means is that we have to tell PHP Storm what files on that server we want to grab and where we want to deploy to, same location probably, and where we want to put those on our local machines. So it already knows the local path. Well, the local path is just as fine. That's where we created our project. And the deployment path, now that it has our access credentials for the server, we can actually click the ellipses there. It will actually let us browse that Linux host. So when you're doing this on a virtual private server, you have full access. So your WordPress setup is probably going to be in var www HTML, unless you have more than one site set up on your server. So we'll go into WP content and themes. So that's going to be the deployment path for the server. That's where current theme exists, and that's where we'll deploy our child theme as well. The web path, we don't have to change that. Apply this. And we also want to add our test server, so let's just right-click on this and say copy. So the new server name, test. We're going to keep all those settings, but instead of production.dakotasoftworks.com, we're going to do test.dakotasoftworks.com. Test that connection real quick. So we've got our production environment and our test environment set up so we can connect and deploy files to both servers now. One thing I also want to do is I want to set the test environment as the default so that if we do deploy files, the first prompt that it offers us will offer to deploy the test, which is a lot safer than deploying it in production. It's really just kind of a safety measure there. We could take a quick look at our test and production sites here. So here's production and test. Unit tests, unit tests are basically automated tests that you write to test your code. So let's pull in our.
So do you have like automated tests for your unit tests? Do you develop like a suite of tests that you have for an integrated development type of a thing?
I know you can write unit tests for JavaScript, things like that, but I don't currently do that, but PHP Storm does support that. A lot of the times it all depends kind of on the criticality of the project and you know what the customer needs. And a lot of the times it's kind of hard to sell your time on doing unit tests. If it's something that you need to do in order to be productive and not break things in production, then it's something you should do because there would be value in that for your client. But if the change that you need to make is going to be fairly simple, then it's probably not worth your time and your client's money to do that. But yeah, you can certainly do that, and PHP Storm will support creating suites of unit tests for that, I believe. Okay. So what we want to do here is right-click on our project file. We have a folder here where our project exists. We go down to deployment. Oddly, it's called deployment because we're actually going to be pulling down from our environment here. Now I'm downloading from test. Normally, the safe thing to do would be to pull down from production. But I just happen to know in this case production and test are the same except for that post that have the different names on it. So we're going to be fine here. So got a child theme here. I'm going to delete it. No, I'm not because I think this one of the sites might be using it right now. But let's create a new child theme. We see our 2014 theme here. Let's create a new directory for our child theme here. Our child theme. And I mentioned before, a child theme contains two files, basically. The style sheet, we can call it style, a CSS, and a PHP file called functions. Just adding those two files. It starts off empty, and I do want to point out that one of our best friends when it comes to doing this stuff is Google. You know, I'm not a cyborg. I can't remember exactly what to type every time, so you know, I code with Google all the time. Stack Overflow and you know, WordPress.org and thing like that. So I think what did I search here? Child theme CSS template. That makes sense. I saw a link here. It just goes to WordPress.org. And here it is. Why use a child theme? How to create a child theme. And here we see the 2015 theme and 2015 child functions and styles. Style. But what we want to know is what do we put in those themes. And here's actually what we put in the child theme header, the child theme file. And some of you may recognize this as a comment with the slash and the star. And normally comments are ignored, but in the case of this file, WordPress system actually looks at these comments and these properties. And we'll see how it does that here. So let's just rename this theme. A child theme. I don't have a theme URL. We don't really need that. JohnDoeExample.com, it's fine. template. So this, I believe, needs to be named the same as the other themes folder. So, or the other theme, and that's 2014. And it's here. And so did we get everything? All right. Now we've got our functions file. You don't need to add something to that, but you don't always need to do that. There used to be an old way of setting this up so that you would do an import statement within your style sheet. I noticed on the WordPress site today that it's actually recommending no longer doing that. It says that's no longer the best practice. So what I recommend is queuing your script here within your PHP file and letting WordPress manage that for you. So if you go to your functions.php, you should just be able to paste this in here right from the WordPress site, because that's how we program. And let's see, parent style. I didn't read the documentation either, but I'm assuming the parent style is where we replace the code. So that's also how we program. Unless it doesn't work, then we read the instructions. So parent style, let's do 2014. You do code cleanup. Didn't do much, but I think it added a space here. Spaces here. But that's fine. I mean, consistency is nice. It all helps to improve readability when you're trying to read code. If you're reading a book and spacing and line breaks are all inconsistent, it's difficult to read it. So let's go ahead and deploy this to test. So we'll right-click on this and say upload to test. And this is what I meant when I said that we want to set test as the default environment. Because if production was the default environment, we could more easily accidentally click on upload to production. And that would kind of defeat the whole purpose of having our test environment. We would likely break something. So we can upload this to test now. Lets us know when that's complete. Go to our test site. I think that's test. We better log in, I guess. Glad to save my password. Username I was more worried about. Okay, so we go to appearance, themes, and see 2014. Boy, that was slow. Did you see that? And here's my child theme that we created here. So we can activate that. Now if we go back to the site, see nothing really changed. But we do need to change a few things. For some reason, I guess this is scaling just like my monitor, but the 2014 theme wasn't made for Retina displays, I guess. So, even though that was 2 years ago, it's internet years, so I guess 2 years is like 1,000 years or something. So maybe we can fix that. First of all, maybe what we can do here is kind of check in what we have so far into source control. Something really neat, even without having a source control repository set up or anything, PHP Storm gives us history of our files right here. So it tells us when we uploaded to test. You can see the difference with functions.php. Oops. Oh, crud. Did I just revert that? I did. So, I don't use this tool, but There we go. So it'll show us our changes. You know, the old, what it was before and what it became before I reverted it. I'll just fix that again. But we do want to check this out into an actual source code repository. And the source code repository I use is called Git. Previously I've used things like Team Foundation Services and Subversion. They have a lot of similarities with each other. One of the main differences with Git is that, from my perspective so far, I know that it also helps with merging and merge management, things like that. But Git will maintain a local repository on your computer, so you can be sitting on a plane and keeping your local source control, your local revisions, and when you're ready, the next time you're connected to the internet, you can check in your changes to a distributed source control repository or remote source control repository. So what we'll do here, there are a lot of options here. I don't see my source control options. Wait a second here. Enable version control integration. Oh, I guess I have to do that for each project. So, create a new project. So, what I did there, VCS stands for version control system. And there was an option there I had to click to enable version control. So, it does support not just Git, but Subversion or CDS or other source control systems. So I did have to tell it which one to use. So it found my local installation of Git, so now it's ready to go. So I can say Git commit directory, no changes. So I have to add these files. It doesn't add a file to source control until you tell it to. So here it's going to give you a list of the files it's going to commit. Included is this folder here called .idea, and this is basically the project settings for your PHP Storm installation. So if you want another developer to have these same settings that we just set up here, they could check this out from source control. They would be set up and ready to go. One thing I'm not sure about that is if it stores the passwords in plain text for this. I'm sure it probably doesn't, but it's a nice way to share project settings. So you can tell it which things you want to check in, which things you don't. And we'll just say, just check in my child theme. So give it a message, adding new files. Commit. Also, another feature here is it'll try to do code analysis, look for errors in the files that you're checking in. Tries to protect you, but I like to turn that stuff off. It's dangerously. Excluding some files, that's fine. Okay. So now we've got a checkpoint in our source control repository. So if we need to revert, if we make a bad change and we need to revert, we certainly can. Now we can go ahead and update this. And this is where I think it gets interesting. Oftentimes we do just want to change some CSS or change a color or something like that. That's pretty easy to do. So what we can do here is inspect this. I'm in Chrome. And we can actually change the color of this. Let's see, say we like this color better. There, we changed it, but the next time we refresh the browser, that change is going to go away because we're just updating our current browser instance, this page. But we do see the CSS here for this element. We can copy this and paste it into our child theme style.css file. It knows it's purple too. Let's deploy this. Actually, let me show you this. We'll commit this, changing button color. At the same time that we commit it to source control, we can upload it to test. So now that we've done that, as soon as we refresh the browser, our change persists because we've actually updated the CSS in the background. And we can actually see the custom or child theme CSS here. It just has this element by itself. Next, we'll do a couple of changes just so we can kind of see what file diffs look like in version control. So let's inspect this element here. That's not the one we want. We can kind of work up the chain until there we go. That might be it. It has a lot of space off to the side there. And if we look at the CSS, we see a suspect max width of 1260. Happens when we do 1600. Probably have to increase that again in 2 years. It's hard to see, but it did. It extended. It was actually two different color tones here. This is white. This is slightly off-white, but it did extend this towards this side here. If you notice, I think Gandalf is more centered there. I've got this header. It's a little short, so is there 1260? There you go. So we'll copy these two blocks of CSS, the changes that we made, back into our style sheet here for a child theme. That we do have to grab that other one. So that's kind of the fun part, because you get to dig down and find an element that you want to change, and you can actually just experiment right there in Chrome until you find the CSS setting that you need to change to make it work. It really decreases the development loop, I guess. You don't have to deploy something to see what effect the change will have. You can just try it out. Once you get it right, then you know which things you changed, and you can move them over to your child theme. So let's commit that, upload it to test. The settings done. It actually still looks like this, but now let's take a look at the source control history for this file. So if we go to Get and show history, we see the list of the check-ins that we made.